Hi everybody, and welcome to my kitchen here in Northern California. One of my greatest passions is baking. And so what I thought we would do today is I would run you through a few tips and tricks on how to make a great cake at home. So I know a number of you are having difficulty finding things in your market. And while I typically make all my cakes scratch, I thought let's make it easy and let's use a national brand cake mix. On the back, as you're following your ingredients, we're gonna make a couple substitutions. So where it says 3 eggs in my recipe, I'm gonna use 4. Where it says a cup of water, I'm gonna substitute that for a half a cup of half and half and some fresh lemons from my lemon tree. We're gonna start by putting all of our ingredients in a large mixing bowl. Again, I've increased the egg, so I'm gonna add 4 eggs to this one. Again, I'm also substituting what it calls for water. This is half and half, so I've got a half a cup of half and half. And then I'm gonna squeeze some fresh lemons from my lemon tree, which are in bloom, and make up the other half and half. I also have a half a cup of oil that I'm adding to my mix. And because I wanna make this a little special, I'm gonna add some poppy seeds, so some dried poppy seeds. And I'm gonna sprinkle it in, maybe a tablespoon, a little bit more, totally up to you. These lemons, these are Meyer lemons, they're a little bit softer. The skin is a little bit thinner. It's absolutely wonderful. And it's not as sour. It's a little bit of a sweeter juice. It's not quite as tart, so it makes great for cakes. And then as we mix it, you'll get the consistency of the batter. Baking is a science. It's all about the ratios of your dry ingredients to your wet. So in every cake, it'll get you slightly denser or a little airier, depending upon what ingredients you have. Okay, use a mixer and get this started and start it on slow so don't get powder like that flying all over. And you want to beat it for about 2 minutes. I think a lot of people, especially at-home cooks, they don't mix the batter quite long enough. You want it to be pretty smooth, and that'll make a really consistent batter as well. I want you to see the batter here. It's kind of thick. It's actually a little thick that I'm gonna add a little more milk or half and half to that because I like a little bit of a thinner batter. So we'll let that work in for a little bit. I'm gonna add one more little touch. Blend that in. Oh yeah, I like that much more. And you'll see it's starting to become a nice, consistent batter. When you're making your cakes, you want to have a spatula nearby and just make sure you get all those great ingredients blended into your bowl. I've also preheated my oven according to the box directions. This one was 325. And I've also prepared some pans. I've sprayed them with a cooking spray and I've lined them with some parchment. I find that really helps to get everything to come out really easily. You're gonna fill them about 1/3 of the way full here. You can guesstimate. We can always top them off accordingly. There we go. And our last one. Now I've got my cake pans filled. Before you put everything in the oven, give them a little tap and you'll see a couple of those little air bubbles come to the surface, so you avoid that. Okay, into the oven they go. After your cakes have cooled in the pan for about 10 minutes, they're still warm to the touch, you're gonna slide a knife all the way around the circumference of the cake just to loosen it. Give it a little tap. And then you want to let it completely cool on a rack. My cakes are completely cooled and they're room temperature. The next thing you want to do is you want to level the cakes. It's not necessary, it's just a nice touch and it really makes for a finished looking cake. You can use a cake leveler like I have here. You can use a serrated bread knife. You can even use unflavoured dental floss. What you want to do is just put it down and make sure that your cake is level all the way around. And then you're gonna shake off all those crumbs. One of the most important things to remember when you're making your cake is they have to be completely chilled before you start frosting. A trick that I often do is I go ahead and I wrap them either in a Ziploc or in plastic wrap and I stick them in the freezer for 5 or 10 minutes. And then you'll make sure that they're 100% chilled and it makes it frosting a lot easier. We're gonna do a basic buttercream and I have 3.5 to 4 cups of powdered sugar, a cup of softened butter, unsalted, a teaspoon of vanilla, and I'm gonna add about a half a teaspoon or a teaspoon of fresh squeezed lemon juice, again from my lemon tree, to give it that extra zip. I've got my 1 cup of softened butter, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna cream that in the standing mixer. You'll recall that I used a hand mixer for the cake, but I think it's a little bit easier when you're doing your frosting to do a standing mixer, excuse me. Okay, so that's nice and soft, and that really helps. And then you're gonna slowly add your powdered sugar. Now keep in mind, you wanna do this slowly so you don't have a white volcano everywhere. I've done that a couple of times, huge mess in my kitchen. And then you wanna do it slowly, about half cup at a time, to make sure it's fully integrated. Some people add a little half and half to give it a little more body. If you'd like to do that, you're welcome to do it. And you need to kind of play it by ear and see how it's coming together. You want it to be a nice creamy consistency. Now, if you're going to be doing any decorating with your frosting, piping, or what have you, you're going to want it a little bit thicker. Okay, it's almost the perfect consistency. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put about a teaspoon of vanilla in, just to give it some little flavor. And because I want to make that lemon pop, I'm going to add just a tiny little bit of this fresh squeezed lemon juice that I made. And we'll let that incorporate. So it's been in my KitchenAid for about a minute or so, and it's completely incorporated. It's very smooth. You can see it's got this nice thick texture, and we can do a whole lot of things with that then as we go ahead and fill and frost our cake. I'm gonna stick this in the fridge and come right back. Okay, we're on to my favorite part, the actual decorating. I've got the cakes, they're chilled, they're all leveled. I've actually placed them on these cake boards. I find that makes it much easier to decorate and you get a nice clean line at the bottom. If you don't have cake boards, and why would you? You can use a cut up pizza box, you can use a piece of cardboard, you can use a shoebox, you can use whatever you have, but it makes it much easier. On my turntable, I also have, it's actually a drawer liner, and I cut it in the shape of a circle, and I use that on my turntable, so it keeps everything from moving. And lastly, I do have a professional turntable. You don't need it by any means. You can use a Lazy Susan. I've actually done that on occasion, but it makes it easier to move the cake and decorate. Okay, now for the filling. We want this cake to be ultra lemony. So again, to make it easier for you, I've got some store-bought lemon curd, which I love, by the way. This one's from Trader Joe's. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a nice healthy amount in between each layer and spread that out so it's nice and even. Now you could just leave this curd and let that be your filling, but we all need extra sweet, and we're gonna go big. And then the frosting that we made earlier, I've put that into a piping bag. Again, you don't have to use a piping bag. I just find if you want it to be consistent, the amount of filling in between the layers, it's easy. And with that, we're just gonna make a spiral and go around the cake. And then I'm gonna take my offset spatula and spread this out so we have a nice equal layer. The thing with using the offset spatula, and again, this is a critical tool, is don't lift it up. Is just to keep it on the cake and keep moving it in directions, and then you won't pull up. When it pulls up is when you're gonna start tearing the cake, and that's when you get crumbs and what have you. Okay, I went ahead and I put the second layer on, and again, a layer of the lemon curd and some of the buttercream we made, and then I've popped on the third and final layer, and we're gonna go ahead and start frosting that. We're gonna do a crumb coat first, even though I wanna show you what we're gonna make. It's called a naked cake, and it's where you can kind of see through the cake, through the icing. We're gonna go ahead and do a crumb coat. So let me show you a trick on the crumb coat. Again, there's no lemon curd on this top layer. We're gonna go straight to buttercream. So I'm gonna use the same technique that I used in between the layers and just do this spiral so I get a nice even coat. Take my offset spatula, and again, we're not gonna lift it up. We're just gonna keep it nice and smooth so we get a really clean, it doesn't pull up and get any crumbs on it. And if you do get some crumbs, no worries. Get a clean knife, pull them off, and start again. That's the beauty about frosting. Frosting can make your cakes look perfect, even when they may not be perfect. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna finish up, or start rather, the crumb crust. The way that I find best to do this, and you can do it any way you want. I like to do vertical stripes, again, with the piping bag up the cake, and do them about every inch or so. And just, this is why it comes in handy to have this turntable. You see how I'm just gonna go around, around. Then I'm going to take my offset spatula and just slowly spread it in. And you'll see as I'm doing that, I'm not lifting, but it's going to give me a nice, clean finish on there. So that's what we're looking for. Once we do it on the whole cake, we're going to pop it in the fridge for about 20 minutes so it seals it. And what that's going to do is hold on to any crumbs. So then when we do the next step, the naked frosting finish, we'll have a clean, perfect base to work with. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have a very clean offset spatula, and we're just going to go around and make sure we have all the surfaces covered. Now this is why the turntable comes in so handy, that I can keep it very smooth, keep my knife centered, my offset spatula rather, and just make sure I have every surface covered. And we want this to be smooth so that when we put the next layer of frosting on, it almost looks like a naked cake now. And this is actually the look. You could stop here. I'm going to show you another technique, but you'll see as we zoom in, it's this really sheer frosting. Isn't that pretty? Okay, I'm going to give it one last smooth before we start decorating. And just to make sure we have that beautiful smooth finish. There we go. Because we're making a lemon cake and I want to keep it very simple, you could do anything that really suits your fancy here, whether it's sugars or candies or what have you. But I like to keep it simple and elegant. It's kind of my style with cake. I'm going to do just some whole lemons and sliced lemons. Whenever I'm putting anything on the top of a cake, kind of the rule is it should be edible of some sort. But I always like to protect the cake a little bit. So I've cut out a little piece of parchment. And I just lay that on top. You won't even see it, but then it just protects the cake. So then I'm just going to play with it, and I'm going to layer whole lemons, some cut lemons, just to give it a different look. I've also cut some greens, and I'm going to play with that and put it right in the cake. When I went out to my garden, I also pulled some of the greenery, and one of them had some florals on it, so I thought it was pretty. So I put it together, pretty simple. A whole lemon, a couple of halves. I also have some sanding sugar here, and this can be anything, and I'm just going to put a little bit of sparkle, and what that's going to do is just give it a little bit of glimmer. Well, that's it. We have a cake. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Thank you all for being such loyal guests of Accor and Fairmont Hotels. Enjoy, happy baking, and just to give it a little more zhuzh, I've got some yellow sanding sugar here, just giving it a little bit of sparkle. So for my kitchen to yours, thanks for being here. Enjoy.